So imagine we have a web server. Now in front of the web server is a caching appliance. Now that caching appliance could be anywhere between the server and the client itself. It could be part of the web hosting infrastructure, or it could be closer to the client, perhaps part of their ISP's caching implementation. Be that as it may, there is a point where responses get cached. Now we have our attacker, and the attacker is going to make a request to the website through the caching appliance. And what the attacker is trying to do is to make a request that will result in a malicious response that gets cached. Now the whole idea of once content is cached is that when a user goes and accesses that same resource, they get the cached version. They don't get the one from the server, they get the one from the cache. That can be a local cache, such as in the browser, or it could be a shared cache. For example, they go out through a common gateway and everybody hits the same cached content. Now, how does the attacker implement a web cache poisoning attack? Well, one of the first things they want to do is remove the existing page from the cache. Now, they can always craft an HTTP request with the header that says not to return a cached version. In addition to that, they can use an attack such as HTTP response splitting. So now we actually need to chain attacks together to return multiple responses and ensure when that HTTP response splitting request goes through that the second response contains malicious content and is then forced to be cached. Then the legitimate user comes, requests the resource, and gets the malicious content from the cache. That malicious content could then include attacks such as reflected cross-site scripting or a cross-site request forgery attack. And that attack would remain valid until the cache was purged, whether that be organically or because someone gets wind of the fact that there is an attack on there and they flush it out. Now, like HTTP response splitting, this is an obscure attack. It's very uncommon, and it simply doesn't feature in any of the lists of the most important risks that you need to be aware of on the web today. But also like HTTP response splitting, it's often referred to in ethical hacking content on web servers. So I wanted to include it. So now you know how it works, but you also know that it's not high on the priority list. This is one of the less common risks that you're going to find. Now that we've covered that, let's go and look at something which is much more common, and that's the ability to brute force an authentication scheme.